Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. My name is Luisa Bravo. I'm the founder and the director of the Public Space Academy. I'm very happy to have you here today for the 7th Keynote Lecture for this year, 2024. This is the last Keynote Lecture that we host for this live-streamed event of the Public Space Academy. We are live on the YouTube channel of City Space Architecture, on the LinkedIn page of the Public Space Academy, and on the Facebook account of City Space Architecture. City Space Architecture is the non-profit organization promoting the Public Space Academy in partnership with the Ove Arup Foundation and with the generous support of UN Habitat. I'm here today with Egle Pilipavichute. Hi, Egle.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. Also, I'd like to say hello to our mentees from our mentorship program. Please say hi on the chat so that we know you're here. I would also like to invite everyone to ask questions at any time by writing those on the chat, and we will go through them at the end of the lecture. Have a great time.
Thank you, Egle. So now we move to our keynote lecture, and I'm very happy to have with us Nadine Bitar, a global thought leader advocating for place-led 4.0. She advises the cities and towns in the Middle East and North Africa region through Baladiya Catalyst, a sustainable development and climate consulting firm that she has co-founded and is leading as managing director. Nadine is also the Secretary General of IFLA, Middle East. Welcome, Nadine.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Luisa. I'm very honored to be part of your Public Space Academy program that I also one of the followers.
And Nadine, you're also a member of the steering committee of the Public Space Academy. So thank you very much for your time today and for bringing your very important perspective from the MENA region. Okay, so now the floor is yours, and we will listen to your lecture, and then in the end we will have the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And really, I'm here to talk about some studies I have done in 2021, 2022 on how can place and place-led policies help us in transforming our city to become more resilient, sustainable, and also inclusive. As we all know, by 2050, 2.5 billion people are expected to move into cities, but mainly in Africa and Asia. And so the number of inhabitants living in urban areas with concentration of more than 50,000 residents is going to double. And this poses a real question about how can we manage urbanization in a way that reduces its environmental impact, but also how we can make it in a way that is inclusive and takes into consideration the different needs of low-income, middle-income, and high-income communities. In particular, if we look at cities and urbanization in the Arab world, our really MENA region is divided into northern North Africa, Levant, GCC, and they are experiencing different levels in terms of their livability and the pressures that they are facing. But also in terms of climate change, it is very important that we think of these urban communities not only as spaces where where we live, but they are also spaces where we will be experiencing some hazards. And it's very important that we understand that this is an impact that needs billions of dollars. For example, by 2030, 3.9 trillion US dollars is expected for us to climate-proof our infrastructure. And of course, we are all aware of the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 around people, prosperity, peace, partnership, and planet, and how this makes urban development, especially as we talk about sustainable urban development, very difficult to tackle. One, because there are so many defined frameworks and theoretical models for the term urban. Not only this, we need all of our disciplines together in terms of urban planning, design, transport, infrastructure, natural system, culture, sociology, urban settlements, especially as we talk about different scales. We try to define that in the new urban agenda launched in 2016 in Quito during Habitat 3, where the right of the city is really multidimensional, with engagement, with accessibility, affordable mobility, resilience, sustainable consumption, gender equality, but also inclusive growth. And where public space really became part of this global discussions around the sustainable urban development. And in particular, it's very important to highlight the commitments that were made in Quito for the new urban agenda to transform cities, such as urban prosperity, access to skills, entrepreneurship, unsustainable consumption, but also upgrading of our informal housing areas. There are some enablers that are very important that we need to take care of as well, like governance, planning and managing urban spatial development. And of course, for our place-led approaches, we need to really talk about participatory engagement, how to collect input, how to facilitate implementation, what are the participatory policies that we can put, and what are the collaborations that we can make. And here it's very important to note that for MENA region, also these challenges are shared. We have additional challenges when it comes to environmental integrity, especially in terms of transport, when it comes to economic vitality, especially when we talk about knowledge-based economic activities, but also social diversity, because as you know, we have multiple crises that could affect our internal migration displacement, but also our youth population. For example, in the GCC cities, more than 180 nationalities live. In terms of competitiveness, it's very important that we still have challenges in meeting this rising inflation, some high unemployment among our youth population. There is some degrees in competitiveness because of lack of infrastructure. And one of my favorite reports is the State of Arab Cities in 2020 that really highlighted a deep dive into what can we do to achieve that. And we have some good examples in GCC cities that have managed to achieve higher ranking in the competitiveness indicators, focusing on infrastructure, focusing on economic policies. But also, we're going to talk about it a little bit more when we talk about the place-led development. So another deep dive that is very important is livability and environment. And we are still trying to get into the top livable cities in our region, especially that we need more integration between land use and transportation. We need more green spaces, and we really need to think about a place-based approach. And this is where it is important to think as place as an approach to transforming our cities. First, because place can help us localize these global agendas. It can help us address societal needs. At the same time, it can help us reframe our governance framework and do implementation plans that are in cooperation with communities. On the prosperity side, place-based policy contribute to local economic development. And in fact, multiple research and studies have highlighted that place is becoming one of the arenas in which economic forces and the tensions they create are actually felt in a place approach. I would like also to talk about that competitiveness and competitive advantage is linked to place in a way. And if we look at Porter framework of competitive advantage, it's very obvious that factor conditions and demand conditions are really influenced by the place-based development of clusters and how we can link talent, tolerance, and technology through, for example, one of Richard Florida talk about creative output and how place could become that. When we talk about social diversity, it's about social cohesion, really. So as place is a tool for economic and local economic development, it also could be a tool for us in the MENA region to address social sustainability, especially when we talk about social cohesion in communities where immigrants or minorities occupy the same place. In particular, sorry, some text is overlapping here, but in particular, I want to talk about tolerance and identity. Tolerance is very important value that place could bring, because when the functions and the activities needed for different groups can be shared, then this enables us to see the other, recognize the other, and bring tolerance into place. Identity, because of the meanings and perceptions that place bring of the different groups and how we can acknowledge their identities either through the physical space but also through the social activities that a place could have. And in that aspect, I want to talk really also about sometimes it's not only how they would like to live, but also how they are willing to spend their leisure time. And one of the workshops, for example, in Dubai that was held around Al-Quoz Creative Zone is a planning workshop where all the stakeholders came together and thought about what creative industry spaces could be in Al-Quoz and how this could transform the area. Other than economy and society, we can talk about place as an approach to transform MENA cities through resilience and environmental integrity, especially as we talk about the green infrastructure, porous gathering spaces. Place-led development can help us a lot in walkability and public transit. And so resilience becomes very much associated with this concept of place. And I want to remind you of COVID-19 and how we really place-led policies have helped some of the cities through COVID-19 bring their communities together and make them more resilient to respond to this pandemics. I'm putting here an example of mangrove in Jubail Island in Abu Dhabi, because when we talk about place, we don't talk only about built environment, we also talk about the nature environment, and especially that most of our very important cities are around ecosystems. It's the ecosystem that made them actually come to this area, and that ecosystem needs to be conserved, needs to be taken into consideration. But also very important that the green infrastructure is not only a layer, it's a framework that we can actually mainstream through it a nature-based solution on a metropolitan level. So nature is very important, and it's interconnected with whatever we do. And especially that, okay, can you see this? Okay, now? Okay. So as you can see, when we talk about nature-based solution, it's all a system thinking approach, but I still think that place is the way. I'm really sorry, the presentation is, okay. Okay, so it's very important here that we talk about place in having. in having different dimensions. So the first dimension is, of course, the spatial dimension. The second dimension is the people dimension. And the third dimension is the environment dimension. And when we talk about this in a holistic way, then place can take multiple scales. Is it a street, even neighborhood, district, city, landscape, region, and then we can start thinking, what are the elements that make place? It's not only topography or geology or weather. It can be flora, it can be fauna, it can be human-made elements and spatial configuration. Sense of place, this unique ambience and atmosphere and character that we want to really bring into a city, it's really sometimes subjective phenomenon, but it is experienced through associations that we need to bring on. And this is one of my favorite places in Riyadh, Al-Kindi Plaza, where you feel like the essence of this authentic translation of sense of place is happening. But also place is people and what they are doing, what are their actions, what is their routines, what are the daily events they want to happen in the place, what are their understanding and the meanings and perception and the stories they tell themselves and others when they go into that space. And this is one of my favorite also spaces in Dubai, Kite Beach, where it's one of the places where everybody comes in, but they come out with different stories and different way in which they experience that that place. So in a nutshell, a place-based policy contribute to economic sustainability, urban social sustainability, but also they can help us in talking about climate change. And we have so many good examples of that. I want to now focus more on how we can make this as an approach. And what could this approach be? I do have an approach that is very much tailored to the Arab context, but I want to take you through a rundown of what could be a approach that takes into consideration different ways of policies. Place, and this is where it's more on a strategic level. What are the policies that we can make in order to make place-led cities, and how these policies can help us transform cities to respond to social challenges, to be more attuned to environmental integrity, and to use place as an economic development tool. And I want to take you shortly through the taxonomy that I've developed. There are five types of policies that cities could use. And the place-led cities 4.0 is a framework that has a policy side and it has a design side. But in this lecture today, I want to focus on the policy side. And people, sometimes they think that design is only the tool that we have, but actually we have so many tools when we talk about place. So I'm going to take you one by one through these different policies. If we talk about, for example, place-based economic policies, they are really economic incentives, and they come into the form of enterprise zones. They could be also programs for low-income communities, especially as we talk about housing upgrades. And for example, in Jordan, place-based economic policies were used to actually provide housing program for low-income communities. More than 1,500 units were released, and they actually have also tackled families that have a lower income than average in Jordan. But place-based policies, they can also be used, for example, when we talk about urban poverty, because they respond to economic and social inequalities inside the neighborhood, and they can bridge this gap in terms of inclusive urban environment. we have multiple causes why we want to use place-based economic policy. It could be that the housing market is not delivering what we want for particular localities. It could be that we have externalities and they are not accounted for in the agglomeration that we have. It could be labor skills mismatch. So in a neighborhood, people don't have the same access to skill and competency. And it could be that we don't have enough a reduction of poverty, and in particular, a place-based economic policy can help us, by the way, to reduce climate vulnerability, especially if we talk about building retrofits in vulnerable districts, if we talk about technical assistance on urban livelihood for communities. Other areas is just the name of these policies. They could talk about town-down economic regeneration. They can talk about downtown revitalization, but also they can actually put specific climate resilience finance measures or incentives for certain neighborhood. And therefore, we are using economy in a direct way, or in an indirect way. For example, transit-oriented development could be considered an indirect way where place-based economic policies are improving access to jobs rather than create them. Enterprise zones are very much used in the UK, and they are a good example of clusters. And these clusters are usually based on place-based economic policy, and they are very successful policies. They generated more than £3.5 billion, and they attracted more than 38,000 jobs. Transit-oriented development is also another good example of place-based economic policies. Despite their problems sometimes in gentrification, if we include within them affordable housing scheme, they can improve access to public transport, they can reduce commuting costs, sometimes they can tackle spatial inequality, and they can also allow access for multiple economic opportunities. Of course, transit-oriented development can have multiple translation in different contexts in countries or in cities or in regions. It depends on the local context. So they are much a flexible notion that we can use. I want to go now to it's so much complex place-based economic policies, and we have more than 20 examples so far in the world. But I just wanted to give an overview of what we can use in some context. So in some context also, and this is very, very important, they can actually help us in infrastructure. In that sense, here, for example, is an example of a fintech cluster in Dubai, where some of tools and instruments were based on location. So people actually, most of the participants or the members in this cluster are located within a certain zone, and they actually benefit from certain advantages. And in some ways, there is a link to social capital because there is some trust and consensus among them. Beirut Digital District is another example, but here it's more about governance, how all these actors come together in the space through certain governance based on entrepreneurship, accessing certain technology sectors, and so forth. Our second category is asset-based community development. And for asset-based community development, ABC, it's really a neighborhood improvement program. But this one is more about running social capital projects and talent development program, focusing on the strength of a neighborhood. What is the neighborhood? Of course, here it's not about mobilizing a particular community. It is more about identifying where are the assets, where are the things in the neighborhood that that we can use to start making them more attuned to our values. And so many neighborhoods have gone through this type of bottom-up approach to improving neighborhoods, and it's really thinking about community social capital as the asset. Asset-based community development, or ABCD, is really focused here on participatory development process. And usually it's linked either to academia, arts and culture, community organizations, civil society. In Ras Al Khaimah, for example, they run a grant system based on ABCD, where they gave community grants and they helped the community develop some small projects to equip them, for example, with the right skills, right competency. And there was some small funding given anyway, but it is linked to an asset. So it's linked to a small place within the community that they want to transform, or they want to actually make it better. It could be through art, it could be through other things. I give here also an example of a small mountain town in Lebanon, Hammana, that they also used ABCD as a way to really build their old market and old city. In transformative place-led development policy, we also have place-led development. Now, this is on a bigger scale, okay? So a place-led development is more transformative, is more strategic, and it's really focused around talent and workers and knowledge economy and the community for a broader goals. And here it's more about large investment, walkability, development through private sector, urban design, and in some ways it could use land as to capture some values, to make the land basically increase in value. Place-led development is very important because it builds on what we talked about competitiveness and cities, and it is a larger scale. It is, for example, here I give an example of Mamsha Saadiyat in Abu Dhabi, is a very good example of place-led development, and here proximity becomes a factor. So, you know, we all have heard about the 15-minute city, the 1-minute city, the 20-minute neighborhood, even 40-minute neighborhood in some 40-minute territory in some aspects. But they all can help. Proximity can be a way to do place-led development, or can be a main value in place-led development, where you put all the activity zones together. For example, in Melbourne, they have used activity center zone as the center of a neighborhood, and they planned it, their neighborhood, 20-minute neighborhood, around these activity center. Dubai now, 2040 urban plan, is actually working towards some 5 districts to be within 800 meters of mass transit station. And also there is a pedestrian master plan. Today they just announced the Green Line. Riyadh opened its Riyadh Metro. So there is this idea of how the station becomes a center for a neighborhood. In some areas, of course. In other areas, it could be activity center, community center. It could be different aspects like parks or an integrated community center. Very important to think about when we think about place-led development is we need to really integrate land use and transit through placemaking. And that is one of the things we can do, especially if we can nurture networks that are locally structured around these. We need to be very careful, because in place-led development, there is some problem when it comes to bypassing some of the city regulation, and we need to make sure they contribute to the local economy. Placemaking is one of the place-led policies. Placemaking focuses more on public spaces, and it's a collective effort to put all the community values and basically reimagine public spaces And definitions of public space, we have a journal of public space that City Space Architecture is publishing, and countless definition of what could be. I just included the most simple one, and it can be debatable, but the idea is the community centricity, and it's about the making rather than the place per se. So when we talk about place making, is the making that is more important, right? The process of engaging all these stakeholders, shaping these places, collaboration, and doing this reiteration of design together. And here the experts are not in the middle of this. The experts are just moderators and facilitators, but also placemaking, and I've taken this from an amazing article on Arab cities and placemaking in the Journal of Public Space. It is a process that can intervene in multiple ways. I'm going to just give you an idea about what some of the ways that could be used. Local authorities. There are now local authorities that are engaging placemaking. For example, I was in WOF 12 with the municipality of Riyadh, and they have a complete placemaking program for some of their parks. They could be launched by community organization wishing to put forward its own vision, or the vision of the community into their public spaces. But it also can be applied at different scales, and it's very important that, as of yet, we don't have a framework of placemaking. We have it more applied on a smaller scale, but it will be interesting to see, how it could be applied. I've put here some of the works that I have done on this aspect. One of them is the Public Realm Guidelines in Abu Dhabi. And in that guidelines, there was a lot of references to placemaking and how it could happen within the context of Abu Dhabi cities, especially focusing really on spatial transformation. And could be through streetscaping, it could be through public markets, it could be through healthy spaces. It could be through public squares or vibrant buildings. These are all ways. And this is another one example of some placemaking strategies I worked on in Riyadh City in the diplomatic quarters, where we analyzed what could be the different category of placemaking and how they could be applied to different spaces. And really here thinking about frameworks, right? Frameworks of interventions into the different spaces, and not really taking one place per se. And I'm going to end with tactical urbanism. And tactical urbanism is something that is new kids on the block, but I'm not sure if it's new or we just notice it because of the COVID-19. And so tactical urbanism, as you know, is referred to by multiple names. But it can be DIY urbanism, urban acupuncture, urban prototyping. We also have lighter, quicker, cheaper. But it's mainly, it's an organizational way of doing these short-term, low-cost, iterative, scalable, a small catalyst. And this is one of my favorite, kit for parks. And this is basically a kit that any organization can get, and it can build a park around it. Very interesting, playful idea. But also it could be short-term, sometimes instant transformation. It's instant, it's momentary. And here, a very nice example from Cairo and Luxor Street, where there was a pop-up local change. One of also my favorite spaces in Jeddah City, where they actually transformed the whole boulevard. These are different colors painted by different people, and it's all the community engaging together, but it transformed the whole aura, right? The whole sense of place we have. Tactical urbanism is usually microsite, and it has different strategies, but even if it's microsite, it doesn't mean that we cannot do it in a different way. So you can start by having a permitting, so just giving some guidelines on permitting some of these micro transformation. Some of the cities chosen to do them as a grant program, so you have these tactical urbanism guidebook and people can apply to grant, and participatory budgeting could be a way. Citywide, it could be like covering the whole city, but then what you have is now, you know, public agencies, public authorities, local authorities coming into the play, planning these citywide projects, and then giving it to communities to implement or execute, or to community service organization. But to be honest with you, one of my favorite ways is tactical plans, and this is more strategic, and how you can actually use tactical urbanism on the whole city. And then you can, and a tactical plan is nice because then what you do, you give tools. You don't have guidelines that are prescriptive, it's more tools, and then you have some areas in which these tools can apply, and it's more how you can use these tools to become better. These are more exploration, but we have to say, and we go now full circle, that tactical urbanism is about the right of the city. So the soft transformation, replacing parking for cars, spaces for people, and plants and nature, are saying that the city is ours. And maybe that's how I want to end my whole overview of place-led policies, to say all these policies around place, conceived around multiple aspects of place, so societal aspect of place, the economic aspects of place, and even the environmental aspect in terms of resilience or climate change. What they are basically is bringing cities back to us, back to their communities, back to their human-centric approach. And so a place-led cities is a city that uses these place-led policies for transforming itself, but not only for strategic goal, but to become a real place for its local communities. Thank you. I'll end this lecture here, and I'll leave the floor to questions.
Thank you very much, Nadine, for your lecture and for this comprehensive approach based on place to actually transform MENA cities. And in fact, I really appreciated all the different examples that you made of different places in the MENA region. Actually, I know your work and I know your effort also in regard of this newly established consulting firm, Baladiya Catalyst. Maybe you want to say something regarding this?
Yes, Baladiya Catalyst is a purpose-driven, social-minded consulting office. It's really talking about MENA cities and from a perspective of secondary cities. In MENA cities, there are 6,000 cities. We all know the big names that I mentioned: Riyadh, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Beirut, Amman, Cairo. But we have also the secondary cities, the intermediate cities. And we wanted, me and my partner, to really think about them and how we can help them use different approaches to transform themselves, because secondary cities usually do not have enough resources, sometimes do not have enough capabilities. Maybe they don't have even the scale. Sometimes, like if you want to do public transport, you cannot have one secondary city, you need to aggregate them. And so our focus will be really on secondary cities in the Middle East and North Africa. And we hope this will drive climate action on the ground and sustainable development on the ground in a participatory and community-centered way.
Well, that's very challenging, ambitious.
Yes.
it is very important to actually move towards this approach, which is taking into account place as part of sustainable development. And thank you for mentioning the Journal of Public Space. Actually, we are also trying to link the Public Space Academy with the Journal of Public Space, since both projects are promoted by City Space Architecture. So for us, it's very important to actually say that we develop research and education on public space through these two projects. I would like to invite now Egle, so that maybe we can check for some questions.
Sure. Yes. Thank you, Nadine, for a very inspiring presentation. I think it's so important for us to know what is happening in meta cities and how they are particular. How can we adapt tools that we know and strategies to those differences there? So I would like to say a few words to our audience. Today we had almost 20 participants, close to 20 on different platforms. And we already have some questions. So I would like to start with Rua. And she's asking, do we necessarily need a general placemaking framework? Doesn't that detract from the whole idea that placemaking is very specific to the community and location?
Thank you, Rua. Very, very important question. We usually use placemaking framework when we want to have a strategic overview of how we can leverage place in different ways. So it doesn't mean that the community cannot reframe or readdress these issues. I can give you an example. In placemaking framework, for example, you might choose to focus on mobility-led placemaking projects in case you have some stations in your community that are not approached in the right way. But for that, you provide guidelines and then you let the community come up with the ideas. So the idea is to guide the community towards real problems and then let them use their creative energy to tackle them.
Yes, I think it's important to highlight the strategic dimension related to place, which is not purely a single place, but it's more intended as like an infrastructure. So that's why you need a framework also to link, places and making activities or tactical urbanism interventions with something that it is also related to some other challenges like mobility. You mentioned this in the lecture, Nadine, or environmental challenges. It's also very important, yes, what you said regarding landscape and the natural environment, because sometimes when we talk about place, we think about urban places, while instead, natural places, as you pointed out, are extremely relevant. And now there is a big, debate on how to bring back nature into cities.
I always say that place, we all associate nature with some places we love in our city. Like a tree we used to sit under, a place that means a lot to us. Maybe some flowers species that make, like for me, I love roses. So whenever I visit a new city or I go to a new city, I want to go to their rose garden, see what is there. And this is a place. A rose garden becomes a place for me. So that's why I wanted to talk about nature-based solution that, especially if you talk about landscape, and this is it's a quote that I got from the president of IFLA Middle East, Dr. Jala Makhzoumi. She's an expert in ecological landscape design, and we were recently in COP16 in the Land Convention in Riyadh, and we are always talking about land as a culture concept. Land is not only environment. Land is not only built environment. It's a cultural concept. And that's what place comes. It brings all these three aspects together. And when people relate to nature as place, they will protect it. When people relate to mangrove as a place, they will protect it. When people relate to our forest as places, they will protect them, because then it becomes part and parcel of their identity, of their meanings, and of their routines.
Yes, well, we have to address that complexity. In fact, anytime we talk about a place or places in general, yes, very relevant. Is there any other questions?
Well, at the moment, we're still waiting for more questions. I encourage everyone, you still have a chance to ask what's interesting, important for you. Maybe I would have a question from my side. It's a bit broader on the topic of migration and growing population. How place-based economic policies are addressing faster population growth in certain cities, and or how they're flexible. Are they flexible enough to address?
Look, I'm going to take just one example. In migration, we not only migrate, we also lose some work opportunities. So we might migrate to new markets where we will not be able to have access to opportunities and so forth. So maybe the issue of urban-rural linkages, when we talk about this place-based economic policies, I didn't research it yet. It's a valid comment. But I can say that for place-based economic policy, it's very important to talk about how we can embed entrepreneurship into that aspect, how these place-based economic policies allow young to really enter maybe the startup, like Beirut Digital District is really about people coming and coming from all these universities and in this space access accelerators, access knowledge and competence, and be mentored and being mentees even for others. And that innovation space becomes a way of also economic inclusion in the city for these migration communities. They are not anymore alienated from the economic realities of their cities. And that's very important because, you know, in MENA region, we are one of the youngest region of the world. 60% of our population is under 30, 40% is under 20. So we have a big challenge of really giving all the opportunities for our youth population to really bring their potential on.
Yes, and probably to address the future of aging population, if having such a huge number. That's
Look,
another.
yes. Another very intelligent question, to be honest. Aging in the Arab world has a MENA region also because it has a different angle. Why? Because as you talked about migration, as young people migrate to other centers, the old people sometimes are left behind, and aging becomes also a very important aspect that we need to talk about when we talk about inclusive placemaking or inclusive places. It's an area that I'm yet to be proficient in. I focused more, as you can see in most of my work, is on the entrepreneurship, young economic competitiveness, talent attraction, and it's an area that is worth investigating.
Well, you know, it's always very fascinating to listen to your perspective, Nadine, because you really, well, at least for me, you bring on the table a completely different way to think, you know, about cities, because you actually experience a completely different environment from what I experience. Even if I've been visiting and living in some Arab cities, still, you know, um, I feel that there is much more, you know, to discover, to understand, and also to learn in terms of sustainable development, because usually assume that sustainable development comes from the global north or from most developed countries. And, some countries are not really represented in our idea of sustainable development. While instead, I'm now following what's going on in Saudi Arabia. And since you are currently in Saudi Arabia, I see that there are many projects. Some of them are kind of contested. For example, the line is very contested, but still seems to be very, visionary project. But in terms of place and in terms of social cohesion, as you were mentioning, I can see that there are several very interesting projects now in Riyadh and in Saudi Arabia. They are also attracting a lot of experts from Europe. This is what I see. Can you tell us something more about what's going on in Saudi
Yes.
Arabia?
I think Saudi Arabia now is one of the biggest labs in urban development. And in a lab, there are some experiments that go through iterations, and there are some experiments that become hopefully good models for things to come. And part of this big urban lab of development is how you can link development and transformation plans. But as you go through transformation planning, please interrupt me, Louisa, with questions if I don't tackle what you wanted, but it's a big topic. You want to really make sure that this economic transformation plan delivers on the societal aspects, right? So part of Vision 2030, there is a whole pillar on society. Volunteering, for example. There is a national target in 2030 on how we want to increase volunteers. And there is also a national target on non-profit sector. And the non-profit sector now has there are different classification, and these classification actually follow the priorities of that development plans. But then part of that non-profit, you have a whole range of CSO focused on housing, focused on place, focused on neighborhood, focused on improvement, focused on different ways. And so I want to say that it's a lab that has multiple features. It has the government, but it also has the state-owned enterprises. You have the CSO. You have also these academia. Saudi Arabia has multiple top 300 universities. They have also center of research like CAPSARC and so. So all these King Khalid Foundation. All these labs are coming together, and of course we see multiple efforts in talking. And I want to focus here on place really, because I want to give you a flair. Maybe place will be the lens where we can approach this. For example, if you go to Al Dar'iyya, place here is about the heritage. Dar'iyya is built around the heritage, the city heritage, be it the built environment, be it the community, be it the architecture and the identity. If you go to Al-Ula, place is more about this desert ecosystem that is also very much about sustainable tourism and these activities that is more ecotourism. So place itself becomes, if you talk about its relationship with the economic transformation plan, becomes a way to bring these aspects together and rethinking them over and over and over again. If you want tangible examples, I think there are multiple ways in which the local communities are engaged. They can be on a spatial way. They can be also on a let's say, human development as well. But if we talk about space, I think one of the programs that I highlighted is the 100 Parks of Riyadh municipality. You have Green Riyadh. It's a very big program in all Riyadh. You have also in multiple cities around Saudi now, they are redeveloping downtowns. They are rethinking how they can have multiple activities. So it's a big urban lab of urban development. So many things happening. To be honest with you, we cannot keep up with everything that is happening. We just know that in like any lab, you'll have experiments, and these experiments might lead to models that we can apply elsewhere, hopefully. And especially that there are 22 Saudi Arabia, you have 60% of the population is young. 60%. That's a very large percentage. So you need to engage them with their spaces, with their cities, with their communities, through volunteering, through participating in greening. For example, Green Riyadh has multiple community programs in terms of greening, how they can bring everybody into their neighborhood, greening their neighborhood. And it's online, it's on their website. You can check it out. Multiple neighborhood greening program with the youth, with engaging them really in knowing more about the environment they live in and how they can be part of the of that. Um, uh, of course, also when it comes to some of the development frameworks, placemaking becomes very important. Like, for example, in some of the companies like NHC or Roshan, they are developing new communities, and these communities placemaking becomes a way of bringing all the community together. Like, for example, hosting Ramadan big tables, communal tables in the middle of the community, like what happens usually in Egypt, or for example, in making sure we have people with disability engaging in different activities in the community. So that's part of the things we are monitoring, and part of the things that could be worked on. But it is also important that this urban lab for urban development is not acting in silos. I think what's happening is there are so many international best practice, and as we all know, as a global urban community, we learn from each other. We're not really siloed as a community. This is what I feel at least, because we can always tap into our, for example, our professional communities. City space architecture is also a membership community, so we can always tap. And Saudi Arabia is not isolated from the whole world. Actually, the opposite. We are. I think it's reaching its hands out to the world and getting these best practice and trying to reiterate them. Of course, localize them is the right word. Localize these international practice and making sure that sustainable communities are not only sustainable environmentally, but also socially and economically, because we want local economic development for all cities in Saudi Arabia. There are some good examples, for example, in Asir, how the local community is really shaping tourism by making sure that tourism is really designed around its own way of life and its heritage. And yeah, so multiple things happening in Saudi Arabia, but it's a lab for the whole world. It's not a lab for our region only because of the scale of things happening, right? Expo 2030 is coming, FIFA 2034 is coming. It's a global lab. Personally, this is what I think.
Thank you for sharing your perspective, Nadine. Do we have some other questions, Egle?
Yes, we do. We do have one more question from Khader. sorry if I'm not pronouncing well. He's asking, we'd like to know if it's possible to get involved in Amam Urban Public Spaces project.
For Amman Public Space Project, there are multiple organizations that are working. I mentioned it as an example. I think UN Habitat is working on some of these programs, and of course you can get in touch with UN Habitat Amman Jordan. And they can give you an idea about how to get involved in these very important projects. And there is some accelerator lab in UNDP that has done some good work around also public spaces in Amman, especially I know, because Amman is also one of the cities that has one of the highest refugee per capita ratios in the world. So very humane city, I would have to say.
Mm-hmm. Well, good to know that there is such a program in Jordan, because it's really important that
Yes.
we actually have, this program starting in different countries and in different cities to pay attention to public space. I mean, this is crucial. Public space, place-led development, place-making, something that is actually addressing social concerns in terms of urban development and sustainable design. Well, I think we do not have other questions.
No,
Correct?
no, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yes, for today. It seems like.
Yes. So thank you, Nadine, for your time, for your lecture, and for being such a strong supporter of the Public Space Academy. And we will continue the collaboration with you and also with your newly established firm, Baladiya Catalyst. We are happy to support initiatives in secondary cities in the MENA region. And this is the opportunity also to, say goodbye to 2024 and prepare for a new set of activities that we are already planning for 2025 for the Public Space Academy. And we will invite you again, Nadine, to some of our activities, especially for the mentorship program that we're currently developing. Now we are in the first season, and we will be starting the second season in 2025. We will announce about the next steps.
It will be great, and Happy New Year to everyone ahead of time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nadine. And see you soon next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.